After a trip to the national championship in 2023, the Washington Huskies will look a lot different in 2024. We're going to go through and give you our predictions for this team. And, there's a lot of unpredictability with this team. New head coach, Jed Fish. We know he's a good coach. He did a really good job at Arizona. The roster looks a lot different. I'll just kind of give you my initial thoughts on this team. I think we'll start with the defense, actually. I think defensively this team is going to be pretty good, pretty solid. Depth, I think, is going to be an issue when you look at a lot of players that they lost. A lot of depth pieces are gone. I think their starting unit on defense looks to be pretty good, pretty strong. And then on offense, they've got some playmakers. They bring in a transfer quarterback who's played a lot of football in Will Rogers. So I think offensively, they're in pretty good shape, except for the offensive line. This is going to be a very, very young offensive line. Not a lot of experience there, and honestly, not a ton of talent, at least based off of, if you want to look at recruiting rankings and all that. So you have not a high level of talent and very little experience. That tells me the offensive line is going to struggle, and I think that's going to be the weakness of this team. That's really the only area where I'm super concerned. Again, depth may be a bit of a concern, especially like at wide receiver. They don't have a lot of proven guys, but their starters should be pretty good. And again, I think this team is going to be decent, but nowhere near where they were last year. And Vegas agrees with that. They've got their over-under at 7.5. So, 7 or 8 wins, the most likely record for this team. I think that's pretty fair. You look at the schedule. They've got Michigan, Iowa, USC, Penn State, Oregon, 5 really tough games there. And some other games that could be tricky as well. Rutgers and Indiana both on the road. You've got UCLA in there. But the non-conference is not too tough. And I think they start with 2 easy wins. Weber State and Eastern Michigan. They should win those. They should be 2-0. Heading into Washington State. The Apple Cup in September. It's going to be much, much different, but hopefully they continue to play that game every single year. I'm looking forward to that. And same thing with Oregon State. Looking forward to those rivalries continuing. And again, it'll be different in September. But, all the big rivalries are not at the end of the season. Look at Oklahoma, Texas. That's kind of in the middle of the season. Look at Iowa State. It's early in the season. But we get to continue those. But as far as this game this year, it will be played in Seattle. And Washington State, I don't really expect them to be great this year. They'll be okay, and I think this game, because the rivalry will be competitive, it'll be close. But I think Washington, at the end of the day, is going to be the better team. So I like them to beat Washington State. Then they'll move on to Northwestern, their first Big Ten game on September 21st. Playing this one at home. I think this is a pretty even matchup. You look at these two teams, and I don't think there's a huge gap. I think Washington probably has a little bit more talent, and Northwestern are going to have a little bit more cohesion with a unit that's been together, a lot of experience coming back, and a coaching staff that was there last year. They lost some players, Northwestern did, in the transfer portal in the spring, where I don't feel quite as good about them. And I think Washington overall with their talent should be able, especially at home, to win this one. So I'm going to go with the Huskies, and I think they start off 4-0. Then they'll play Rutgers on September 28th on the road. A Rutgers team that's going to be good defensively again, but I think they're going to struggle offensively. And, I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think that front seven for Rutgers is going to give this Washington offensive line some trouble. I think they're going to struggle to score. I think Rutgers will struggle to score in this game as well. So, again, I think it's going to be very low-scoring. A home field advantage for Rutgers, that will help. And I just think they find a way to get it done. I think the low-scoring game favors them, and I like Rutgers to pull off maybe a slight upset here and beat Washington. Next, we've got Michigan on October the 5th. This will be a home game for Washington. Rematch of the national championship, which is kind of crazy, but totally different teams. New head coaches. It will not really resemble the national championship at all. I don't think either team will be really anywhere close to as good as they were last year, except for I think Michigan's defense will be, and that defense is going to be a problem for Washington. I think their offensive line will really struggle in this game, and because of that, I like Michigan to win a fairly low-scoring game, but I think the Wolverines take care of business. I'm going Michigan, and then we get kind of the same story with this game against Iowa. It's going to be a really good defense, not great on offense, but that defense is going to make it very tough for Washington to score. I think it's a lower-scoring game. think that favors Iowa, and I like Iowa especially playing at home to get this win. All right, so they get a bye week after that. Then they'll go back on the road to play Indiana on October 26th. And the Indiana team that I've been talking about is a sneaky good team. And, if they didn't have a bye week before this game, I would really be worried. And I'm worried anyways. I think this is going to be a tough one for Washington. I don't know that they win this game. Again, Indiana, a surprise team this year in my opinion. But still, I think Washington is the more talented team. I think the bye week, having that extra time to prepare. And I think the offensive line for Washington by this time will start to play better. Again, they've got a lot of youth there, inexperience. But I think they'll start to play better as they get into October. Using that bye week, they come out and they play really well. They beat Indiana, but would not be surprised if they lose this game. Really, I'm looking at Rutgers and Indiana. I think they will split those two games. Which one will they win? Which one will they lose? I think the Rutgers game, just the style of that game, is probably going to favor Rutgers. This one, maybe a little bit more scoring. I think that favors Washington, and I think they get the win here. Next, we're going with USC on November 2nd. A very talented team, a very explosive offense. I think they'll score. I think Washington will score in this game as well. I think both the defenses are going to struggle. I think the offensive line for Washington, again, will be getting better. And if you look at the weakness for USC, it's probably their defensive line. And this is late in the season. They don't have a ton of depth. Washington, again, I think will be improving. So I think they'll be heading in the right direction. Then you look also at the home field advantage going in the favor of Washington. I think Washington gets a huge win. I think they knock off USC and get probably their biggest win of the season. I'm going Washington. Then they'll play Penn State on the road November 9th. Again, this will be similar to Rutgers, Michigan, Iowa. Low-scoring game, defensive battle on the road. A tough place to play. It's just hard to imagine, in my opinion, Washington going in there and winning this game. I think they'll compete. And again, lower-scoring game that should give them a chance. But I think at the end of the day, Penn State's just going to be too good, too talented. And I'm going with the Nittany Lions to win this game. UCLA on the 16th. Kind of similar to Washington, a new head coach, a lot of transfers, but they still have, just like with Washington, they still have talent on this roster. I think these teams are going to be pretty even. And I think it's an even matchup. You look at just the styles of play, the two teams. I don't know for sure what we're going to get out of the new coach at UCLA, but home field advantage is going to be the difference here. So I'm going to go with Washington because they're playing at home. I think they win this one. They beat UCLA, get to 7-4. And then they'll close things out with Oregon on the road. A rivalry game, I know, but I just look at these two teams, and Oregon is just on a different level. You look at the talent, you look at every area of this roster, they are just loaded. Washington, not so much. The game is at Oregon. It's hard for me to see Washington going in there and winning this game. I don't know how competitive it'll be. Maybe a fairly close game, but at the end of the day, I like the Ducks here. I think Oregon wins. They beat Washington, and Washington finishes 7-5, which I think is a pretty fair prediction. Again, you look at Northwestern, Indiana, USC, UCLA. All four of those games are games that Washington could lose. And then on the flip side, you look at these games in the red. How many of these would you say Washington can win? Maybe Rutgers. That's about it. I don't see them beating Michigan, Iowa, Penn State, or Oregon. So it's almost like best case scenario is 8-4. I think 6-6 might actually be more likely than 8-4. But I'm going with 7-5. Again, a lot of question marks just as far as what we're going to see from this Washington team with so much roster turnover and a new coaching staff. I think they can get to 7-5, though. That's my prediction. What's your prediction? Give me your thoughts on this team down in the comments below.